Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Planning and Development Management Committee. Today, Tuesday, the 14th of December, 2021. Indeed, today is the last Planning and Development Management Committee of 2021. Before we start on the proceedings in front of us on the agenda, I really would like to say a few words because today is the last committee that Mr. Jamie Scott will be attending. He is leaving us. He has been caught by the pull of the private sector, and Mr. Scott will be leaving the council at the end, on Christmas Eve. So I wanted to take a wee moment to express not only my thanks to Jamie for the sterling work that he's done within the planning department and the quality of work that he has produced in getting the different planning applications through the council, but also on a personal level. Jamie was particularly helpful to me in his assistance and his coaching given to me in the early stages as a new convener, and equally for his patience and persistence at my questioning that kept coming, and his general openness to assist me whenever needed. So Jamie, thank you very much indeed for everything that you've done. You will be missed. I'm sorry to see you go. But having said that, I wish you all the best for your ongoing career and for 2022 and beyond. Thank you. Okay, now we have to go on with the proceedings of the day. So, welcome everybody, and I'm going to go across to Mr. Williams for any substitutes or apologies.
Yes, thank you, convener. We've got a couple of substitutes today, so we've got Councillor Lang joining us. He's substituting for Councillor McEwen, and Councillor Forbes is substituting for Councillor Illingworth. We also have a further apology from Councillor Williamson.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'd like to introduce the virtual top table, if I may. I have Councillor Bob Braun, the Vice Convener of the committee, Mr. Christian Smith, the Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr. Jamie Scott, for the last time, Team Leader, Mr. Colin Elliott is the Solicitor, and Mr. Danny Williams from Committee Services. Quickly through the usual bit that you've heard before, but members are reminded that if you need to leave the meeting during the consideration of any of the applications, or you're not able to participate in any way, you're not able to participate in any way in a vote that may come if you lose contact to the meeting. So that is entirely up to each member to decide whether they have heard enough of the proceedings to be able to go into that, but I do have to request that if you do lose contact in any way, could you let us know in the meeting chat box. Also using the meeting chat box today, we're well versed with this, but if you want to attract my attention, I do need you to use that. Putting the hand up won't actually do it because I don't have everybody in front of me. So if you could use the meeting chat box to attract my attention, that would be great. And if I could now ask Mr. Williams to do a roll call of the people in the committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, convener. So when I call your name, everyone, if you can let me know whether you're present. So I'll actually start with the substitutes today. So Councillor Lang.
Sorry, Danny, I missed that.
Yeah, just a roll. Well, I've got you as present now anyway. So
okay, thanks.
So thank you, and Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, morning. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the regular committee members now. So Councillor Barnacle.
Present.
Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Brock.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor James.
Morning, Danny. Present.
Morning. Convener, we've heard from yourself. To Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
What was that? Councillor Waters.
Present, Danny.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
Present.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And that should be everyone here that's meant to be here, convener.
Thank you very much. That's great. So next is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest on the applications in front of us today? If you do, could you please put a DI in the chat box? Okay, there is nothing coming forward, so I'll take it that there are no declarations of interest. Also, for deputations, there are no deputations that we need to hear, so I can swiftly move past that. So item 4 in the agenda, minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Development Management Committee. Do we have an agreement that they are an accurate reflection of the committee?
Agreed.
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 Thank you, committee. Okay, so swiftly we have moved on to today's proceedings. The first on the agenda was a major application for 122 holiday accommodation units, but that application has been withdrawn from the applicant. So there's not much to discuss, but I do see that Councillor Reid has a question on that. So Councillor Reid, your question, please.
Thank you, convener. If this had been coming forward, I would have had to put in a declaration of interest because I was an objector. I did receive a letter from Mr. Smith on Friday afternoon saying that this application, as an objector, saying that this application has been withdrawn, but any representation I had, if any, in the future would have to be submitted again. Can I just ask, for my own interest, does that mean if the applicant wants to submit an application, it has to start from scratch?
Mr. Smith, if you could respond to that, please.
Yes, Councillor, in effect, the process would start over again, so your objections or comments would not be carried forward to the next application, which may differ in some ways. So each application would need to be considered on its own merits. So if you had comments on any new or revised submission, then you would have to make them on that, yes.
No, my point really is, from an applicant point of view, would the developers have to start from scratch?
Well, they would need to make the application afresh.
Completely
Is there any
new?
particular thing that you're referring to? Is that in terms of public consultation or?
Yes.
Well,
Everything,
it would depend.
basically.
Yeah, it would depend on whether or not the proposals changed significantly enough to require the public consultation to be revised, and or the timescales that were related to the revised submission, and whether or not the public consultation which had been undertaken was still valid, because there are timelines associated to that. So it really would depend on when and if any fresh application came in, and we would advise the applicant accordingly.
Sorry to labour the point. What is the timescale then? Do you know?
In terms of public consultation for major applications, it's 18 months.
Right, so they're out with that now. That's fine. So that they'd have to go through all that again.
Yeah, apologies, but I don't have the dates of when the notice of initiation, the notice of the public consultation was submitted.
Yeah. I do understand your concerns, Councillor Reid, on this, but as we're not discussing it, and I'm happy that you've taken the opportunity, but maybe if there's any more detailed questions that you would like answered, we could maybe do that after the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of 511, which moves us swiftly on to 512. So application 512 is the formation of a 49.9 megawatt energy storage facility comprising of 50 battery storage containing units, control building, auxiliary equipment, parking, access track, boundary treatments, landscaping and associated works at Shindar, Feddle Hill Wood near Braco. And could I ask Mr. Jamie Scott to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Thanks again for your kind words at the outset of the meeting. I'll now take committee through some stills, providing the context of the application and an overview of the proposal. So this first still confirms the location of the site, the red rectangular area on the left of the image, as well as the proposed access route to the public road network from the B8033 to the southwest of Braco. It is the extent of the site. It's the rectangular area itself which is actually subject of development for this planning application today. It's located in a proposed woodland, so it's proposed in a woodland area, which is a coniferous plantation on Feddle Hill, and it's known as Feddle Forest. So that lies 3.7 kilometres west of Braco. The area itself is sparsely developed, and it's characterised by its upland location and the forestry land use. The nearest residential property is approximately 1.2 kilometres to the south of the site. Next slide, please. This is the site location plan on an ordnance survey base. So as you'll see with the as with the red line boundary, sorry, as with the aerial photography, it shows the extent of the site. Although this just shows the area of the site being developed, as I said, on the south part of the plan, you'll see the area for the battery storage facility. There's a track that protrudes north from that. That's a new track area that they're proposing to connect to the existing track. So the existing track is the solid red line with a hatched area. That's existing, that track. That serves the current substation and forestry land uses. So just draw your, in terms of location, draw your attention to the proximity of the development with the proposed, with the Braco electricity substation, which is immediately to the northeast. So you can see that just to the northeast of the plan in front of you. So essentially this development represents a co-location of the battery storage with the substation. So the general arrangement of the development is indicated, but I'll provide more details on the next slide. Previously, the site was a forested area, but it has been clear-felled of trees as part of the ongoing commercial woodland operation, which means there's a managed cycle of planting and felling occurs in all the areas beyond the boundaries of the site, in and around that and the development, the substation area. Assessment has nevertheless been undertaken as part of the planning application about woodland and habitat matters. I'll now take you through some excerpts of the applicant's landscape and visual assessment to illustrate the appearance of the site, both before and after the proposed development. This is the first viewpoint, this is the site location plan. So just in a bit more detail, showing you the layout. The white rectangular areas you can see are actually the individual battery storage facilities. They are paired up with small transformers, which are the small kind of rectangular areas next to them. In the west of the site, you'll see that there's two large transformers which will provide the connection from the site to the electricity grid, and there's an office and storage facility. The orange area on the plan is actually a hard standing area, which is of loose gravel with permeable membrane beneath, just to make sure there is free drainage within the rest of the site. To the north of the site, I did indicate that there was a red connection. That's the new road, which will be constructed as a floating road on top of the existing bog substrate, so they're not interfering with the bog. And the applicant has indicated on the southern boundary there a landscaping screening, but as part of the recommendation, there is actually a requirement for further landscaping on all other boundaries. What I'll do now is I'll take you through some visuals of the of the photomontages provided by the landscape impact assessment. So this first viewpoint is located 300 metres northeast of the site, which is broadly representative of the view of the site from the approach of the access track. So this still and all the other stills will show the site as it currently is in the upper image, which is the baseline, the existing condition, and the lower image illustrates the appearance or visibility of the development as constructed. So at this specific location, the montage shows the structures and fencing from the proposed development will be visible. It should be noted, however, that these are viewed in the context of the larger, more visible substation, which is to the right of shot. The potential green colours of the development will integrate well with the surrounding woodland, and it's also highlighted that the photo montage doesn't actually illustrate any landscaping in this location. So as I mentioned, proposed condition 9 would result in further appropriate boundary landscaping treatment, which will provide further mitigation for landscape and visual effects. These will be formed of native species, and the landscaping would also add to the biodiversity benefits of the proposal. Moving now to a viewpoint located 300 metres west of the site. This is taken from an existing forest track at that location. Again, the photo montage illustrates the visibility of the site, but within the context of the existing substation and woodland. The landscape and visual impacts are not significant and will be assisted by the landscape boundary treatment that I mentioned earlier. Next still, please. Lastly, this viewpoint is located approximately 700 metres to the north of the development. So for reference of location, the existing substation is visible in the centre of shot. The wireline diagram at the bottom illustrates this time the theoretical visibility of the proposed development adjacent to the substation. However, given intervening topography and woodland, the development would largely be screened, which would be further mitigated by the proposed landscaping. So in a sense, it's not really visible from this location. And that now concludes the stills, convener, and we'll return to the site layout plan.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for that. I'd like to ask councillors to put forward any if they wish to ask any questions. And I see that Councillor Wilson is quick to do so. So we'll start with Councillor Wilson and then we'll go to Councillor Simpson. Councillor Wilson, do you have your question, please?
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Mr. Scott, for your presentation. I'm on page 42 and the roads and access issue. It's really to ask the question, there's a lot in here about traffic management and warning of heavy loads, etc. what I can't easily see, and I may have missed it, convener, is any points to help repair any damage done to the road network, the public road network. So I wonder if Mr. Scott's got any comments on that issue.
Yes, over to yeah, I was going to do that. I was wondering either if Mr. Scott or Lachlan, if you would be able to answer that question, please.
Thank you, convener. With regards to your point about repairs to the public road network, we'll have a construction management plan which will be in place for the development. That's condition 2, and then there'll also be the transfer of any abnormal loads to the site. So we will have a condition survey associated with them, and that will take account of any damage to the public road network.
Thanks, convener. I've read condition 2. I think I've read it properly. Wouldn't it be helpful to have some wording in there that simply said that the developer will need to repair the damage if there's any damage caused?
Well, yes, I think is the short answer to that, but I think that's what it, to me is how it read. But Mr. Scott, if you'd like to come back in on that, please.
Yeah, so as Mr. McLean highlighted, so there are several conditions for roads and traffic matters. So the construction traffic management scheme and the construction traffic management plan together with the abnormal load survey. So we need a scheme that's presented in order to make sure that we know where the road, where the traffic's going, what vehicle movements, etc. And as part of that process, we will have ability to ensure that any impact on the public road network will be mitigated again. So we're quite satisfied that this is a model condition that we use for many planning applications, and it's been tried and tested.
I'll rest my case at that, convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Simpson, your question, please.
Thank you, convener. Councillor Wilson has practically asked my question. I just would like a little bit further clarification. Many of us will have experience of difficulties caused by construction traffic, and I wonder if we can get any more comfort about how effective these measures will be when the construction is ongoing, because often developers seem to think that it's okay to make it good at the end, but people have to use these roads during the course of construction. And I just wonder perhaps what comfort we can have that the roads will be maintained during construction and not just made good after construction.
I'm not sure who would be best to answer that. Mr. Scott, could you possibly come back in, and then we'll see if Mr. McLean's available to do so as well.
Yeah, so the majority of access to the site is obviously on the public road network. We're not aware of any particular issues with the public road network. Clearly, the applicant has indicated the likely vehicle and HG movements associated with the development, which are not particularly significant. The access from the point of the B road I was referring to earlier, it's obviously all private track, so that's not going to be subject of any controls of any planning conditions because it's a private track. If Lachlan has any further comments he wants to add to that.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. Regarding condition 2, we've got a number of points in there, and point F is arrangements for wheel cleaning and chassis on vehicles to prevent the deposit of material on the public road network. And if there is any materials deposited on the public road network, an arrangement has to be in place for that to be swept, ideally at the end of each at the end of each working day, just so that the public road network is free of any deposits. I am aware that there may be sites where that doesn't happen, and if there is a case of that, we will either follow that up through a number of avenues, maybe through the roads maintenance partnership, the officers will go out to the site, and in some cases it may be enforcement. So there are a number of avenues that we can follow up if there are any issues that are highlighted to us.
Does that satisfy that answer your question, Councillor Simpson?
I'm happy with that answer. I'm not always happy with that it works out that way, but I'm happy with the answer.
Yeah, just as an add-on to that, I mean, knowing that road particularly well, especially with some of the other roads coming from Stirlingshire, that road is very much used by heavy goods vehicles because of various different weight bridges and what have you roundabout. So the road itself is used to reasonable traffic on it and reasonable freight. But as long as we're doing our bit and making sure that this doesn't have an impact on it, then I think that's considered. The next question is from Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, thanks, convener. This is probably something that Councillors Gray and Reid might be aware of. I think I'm right in saying there's quite a lot of deer in this location. So I'm just at paragraph 2, which says the site is partly surrounded by an inner security fence, although looking at the diagram, it suggests it's completely surrounded by it. Is the site, apart from the actual vehicular access, is the site completely surrounded by fencing and then to be enhanced by woodland? The reason is security from actually wildlife like deer getting into the site. I presume it will be secure.
Mr. Scott, if I could ask you to answer that question, please.
Yeah, apologies if it's not clear in the report. The site would be bounded on all elevations by a 3-metre high palisade fence, and that's to protect the compound in effect. Beyond that, within the landscape and buffer that's being proposed within the site boundary, there would also be deer stock fencing, I believe, going in. There is a planning condition that would require further details of the materials and fencing, just to make sure the landscaping and fencing work appropriately, to make sure that there's an appropriate interface between wildlife and the development. So yes, there are 2 levels of fencing in effect going in.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Waters and then Councillor James.
Thank you, convener. Just want to ask a question or a bit more information on the peat management plan that's put forward in the papers. A little bit more understanding on on policy. I went and lost it. On policy on item 74, it talks about that SEPA advises that management to strongly control the soft rush is important to this site. Can I get a wee bit of explanation what that means? I understand it's to do with the carbon, the plants growing and the carbon capture, and also just if there is any more information on the benefits from a carbon perspective, where it sits just now, and the benefits with the work they're going to do to try and enhance the carbon capture of the area by using the peat that will be removed.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, over to you. We were discussing that earlier, so yeah, straight over to you.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Waters. So the site itself is a peatland, but it's essentially degraded peatland given its forestry use. So effectively, it has been dried out, and it's not particularly of high quality. So SEPA don't have concerns about it being a kind of keystone kind of habitat in and of itself. That said, it is known that there is peat in the area. So the applicant has submitted survey depth charts and proposals within a peat management plan to how they're going to manage the development. It's shown it's a fairly shallow peat overall, and where they are developing as far as they can, they're building on top of the peat, as I mentioned about the floating road, and they're putting permeable surfaces as far as possible on top of the peat for the actual compound itself. There will be some foundations required for the transformer buildings, but given their size and weight. So as part of the assessment, the applicant's done essentially an assessment of what peat needs to be removed, and clearly some does need to be removed within the peat management plan. That will be relocated in effect within the surrounding area to improve the existing peatland, which, as I said, has been degraded. Some of the excess peat would also be used in terms of cutting off ditches and stopping water leaving the site in effect. So what that'll actually do is it will allow into the north and east of the site plan that's in front of you just now. It'll be a form of bog restoration, given the ditches that are going to be filled. Within the peat management plan, which further detail is still to come forward, yeah, you're right. It's just to make sure that within the wider area, within the ownership of the landowner, that there is an improvement. The peat's being retained, and there's not going to be an adverse impact on the species and plants that are there. It'll actually allow them to be re-established, so surplus peat is being used effectively. So there's a planning condition to control that. In terms of carbon, we did require a carbon balance assessment submitted as part of the planning application. So paragraph 78 talks about the outcome of that assessment. What it's saying is that there's no net increase in carbon emissions. The retention of peat, the construction methods that are being undertaken will actually reinvigorate the land surrounding and deliver further carbon capture. So in effect, it's having a neutral effect on the carbon and the peat side of matters, but there's a slight positive effect in terms of species that have been brought back into the bog restoration area, and also that would be required to be used as part of the landscaping buffer. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And last question so far is from Councillor James.
Thanks, convener. And I guess, Jamie, you kind of answered it slightly, my question to Councillor Waters. Mine's regarding the access road into this site, not the roads around, which we've talked at length at, but something you said in just now, actually, when you were answering Councillor Waters, was that this is a floating road. To me, I've never heard of that, I'll be honest. And with that, would there be a weight restriction? I'm just thinking from a safety aspect, if being what it is, you'd have heavy vehicles needing to get in there if there was an emergency. Is there a weight restriction on access on that road? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I believe that's over to you, Mr. Scott, for a response.
Yeah, it's a floating road insofar as they're going to have no or minimising dig within the carbon itself. So they're not disturbing the carbon. What they're doing is they're putting a substrate and hardcoat area on top of the existing the existing peatland that's there. That'll be designed and engineered to ensure that it's adequate for the development. Clearly, it does need to take a reasonable degree of weight. So that 175 metre stretch of road will be designed appropriately with a compacted hardcoat area, but that's permeable. So and with a membrane. So what that'll do is it'll filter out within a SUD system to stop, pollutants getting within to the carbon. They'll be directed to a SUD scheme, which is going to be subject of a further planning condition that needs to be implemented, presumably within the bog area. So the weights would be appropriate, and we wouldn't need to see any further detail on that, because it can cope essentially. It needs to take the weight of a standard HGV that will be delivering the larger bit of kit, which is the storage containers with the battery in it, and we're quite satisfied from the information that we have that will be appropriate. But we will have planning conditions on construction environmental management plans and construction method statements, particularly for condition 11 that's recommended, that will ensure that all of these details are appropriate and capable of taking the deliveries that are planned.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any further questions for officers? Nope, there's nothing more coming forward. So I'd like to ask for a motion, which I'm happy to put forward myself. I think we should go ahead with this. It's the approval. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray. I'm happy to defer to you as you are a ward councillor. So over to yourself, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, convener. Yep. I've got to say, as a local councillor and fairly familiar with this area, I can't imagine a more appropriate place to put such an installation. It's very well clear of public property. It's isolated, it's well screened, it's on a flat surface, on a plain, if you like, above a hill. Very difficult to see from a distance, and very appropriate for that reason. It's a very good access to it, which was built to take heavier loads, I believe, than will be required to go into this installation. Were already taken into the substation itself, which was built 4 or 5 years ago on the Bewley-Denny line. One little point I would make, so there's a slight confusion in the background and description when it mentions the access at the Muckle Burn. It's not the access at the Muckle Burn, I must point out, and I would like just to clarify that for local people. The access is at Fennel, in fact, along the very well established road to the site. I see no problem locally with this. Heavy traffic does use that road, as convener suggested, because of the difficulties along at Kinbuck, which is at the west end of the road, with a very restrictive bridge. So many heavy vehicles have to come that way to it, as Councillor Lyle will be well aware, because he is along that road. Now, I hope there's a second to this, because I'm quite happy with this presentation. Thank you.
There is indeed. Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor James is happy to second. Councillor James?
To be honest with you, Councillor Gray has said pretty much everything I would like to have said. I can't think of a better location, in all honesty. Purpose made, and it's nice actually. Pre-application, you know, comes to us, and obviously it does get taken into account, because everything we mentioned before on similar ones to this have all been taken into account. So thanks to the officers for that, and I've absolutely no qualms in seconding this application.
Thank you. Do we have an amendment?
No.
No, thank you very much indeed for saying that. That brings it swiftly on. Yeah, so thank you very much, everybody. The application is approved. Thank you. Okay, so that then brings us on to the next application in front of us, which is 513. This is a S42 application to delete condition 7. Public transport and infrastructure of permission that was granted on 19-02033 IPM land 150 metres south of Target House, Ruthvenfield Road, Inverarmond Industrial Estate in Perth. I just want to state up front, we are only looking at condition 7 at this point, please, councillors. So I know the next paper is on an additional condition on the same application, but this is just condition 7, please. And could I ask Mr. Christian Smith to speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. I'll now provide a brief summary of what the application proposes before some slides to identify a bit more context. So the application itself seeks to delete a planning condition applied to a planning permission in principle to develop a western extension to Inverarmond Industrial Estate. This condition requiring that public transport infrastructure is included in future detailed applications to ensure that items such as the design of the roads allows buses to travel through the site, and also that suitably designed and located bus stops are provided. In effect, the application seeks to remove the requirement to consider or deliver these elements in the ultimate delivery of the development. The consideration of officers is that the condition should remain, and as such the application is recommended to be refused. Now, moving on to the slides. First, we have an aerial photograph which highlights in red the location of the site. As can be seen, it sits to the east of the existing parts of, or to the west, sorry, of the existing parts of Inverarmond, and also to the north or other parts of Inverarmond. To the west is the link road between Perth and the A9, then up towards Bertha Park. The roundabout, which would also provide access to Almond Valley Village, is to the northwest. Next slide, please. This second image is designed to illustrate the location of the existing bus stops, which are marked as blue dots, and the routes and distances associated to the indicative layout provided within the planning permission in principle, marked in yellow. So although this indicative layout has not been approved by the planning permission in principle, it gives an impression of the potential roads and footways, as well as plots within the site. These arrangements have then been used to guesstimate the distances which would require to be walked between those existing bus stops and plot entrances. The indication being that a number of plots would exceed the accepted maximum walking distance of 400 metres, and therefore that the as the crow flies distances indicated by the applicant are perhaps misleading. The nature of these existing bus stops would also need to be considered in terms of their quality and how they would serve any patrons using buses. So thank you, convener. That concludes the presentation, and we return to the site layout. Sorry.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you. Okay, so I would open it up for questions from councillors to officers. So thank you for coming in quickly there. Councillor Simpson, your question, please.
I'm determined to beat Councillor Convener. I just have two queries. One, there's no indication here that this is anything other than possibly a cost-saving exercise. I don't see any other justification for the deletion. But I wanted to be clear, although we are putting in the infrastructure, we have no powers to provide any actual public transport service itself. It's simply the infrastructure. Is that correct?
Mr. Smith, yes, I was hoping it'd be yourself. If you could answer that question, please.
Yes, that's correct. This simply relates to infrastructure provision that would physically be provided. Yes.
But back to my first bit, if I may, convener, I take it there is no other reason being given or for why this would want to be deleted apart from a cost saving.
Mr. Smith,
an apparent cost saving.
That's certainly how it comes across. But Mr. Smith, I don't know sure if you know it any more than we do.
Yeah, there's a bit more set out in the submission that's listed on the website and things, but it's more or less that they feel that it's not required.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
That answers my question, yes. Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Thank you. Do we have any further questions for officers on this particular deletion of condition 7? No. Thank you very much indeed, councillors. So that then takes us on to ask for a motion. And again, I'm happy to do that unless anybody local wants to come in. Councillor Simpson.
So I'm not local convener, but I think I'm very much in favour of promoting active travel, as you may have noticed over the last few years. There's only one thing better than a bus lane, and that's than a cycle lane, should I say, and that's a bus stop. And I think it's sending out the wrong message to delete this sort of condition. They're thought through at the time of planning permission, and I think it's very important that we send out the right message and we have as much active travel infrastructure as possible. So I'm very much in favour of this, convener.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, just for clarity, is that 2 comments you have, or you wish to second the motion?
It's kind of both, convener.
Then I'll happily let you do both.
Cake and eat it time, but I want to second the motion and make the comments within that. It won't come as any surprise that I'm happy to second this motion, and I welcome the report actually, because it's quite firmly written, if I may say so. This approval was given fairly recently, as we all know, and it's a wee bit premature, I think, for the developers even to come back at this stage without any evidence base. I think Councillor Simpson's made that. We're about to discuss tomorrow at the full council meeting a whole range of issues about climate change and travel, and the availability of public transport is high on that agenda, and therefore I think the developers should be encouraged to think positively and engage with the local bus company to look at actually providing bus services rather than trying to winkle out of their obligations in providing the necessary infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Before we go to further comments, I just have to ask if there is an amendment to the motion put forward. No, there is no amendment. Thank you very much indeed. So your comment, Councillor Lane, please.
Just to say I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Wilson's comments there, with the paper coming to full council tomorrow. We have to be showing that we stand behind our commitment to tackling climate change and making a societal shift in the way that we get to work and we get home from work, and it only makes sense that if we're going to bring papers forward to full council to help alleviate our carbon footprint, that this is the sort of thing that we cannot afford to remove from a planning application that's been granted.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, your comment, please.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what's being said in the favour of having this stay as it is. We're building many hundreds of houses very close by at Bertha Park, and it's essential that we create the ideal infrastructure transport-wise to get people to and from work here and ensure that they don't wish to travel any further by taking on work that doesn't occur as near possible to their home. And providing easy access for public transport is essential to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I would also like to add a quick comment. Part of the issue that keeps coming forward is the ability to get to work in public transport always seems to be an issue, hence the reason we always get requests for further parking within Perth and Kinross. To have this being made harder for people to actually move to and from their work and their place of work, especially in Inverarmond, is just entirely the wrong direction. So I concur entirely with all the comments made with councillors. To me, there is no justification for this, and I applaud the refusal of this application, and thank councillors for their comments. As there are no further comments coming forward, I would say that the application to refuse has been granted, whichever way around. Sorry, I mean, my English was a bit wrong there, but anyway, the refusal of that application has gone through. So thank you very much, and that brings us on to the final application, except for the PAN notice, but the application in front of us is 514, and this is an S42 application to delete condition 2 of developer contributions, again of the permission of 1902-033 IPM on land 150 metres south of Target House, Rustonfield Road, Inverarmond Industrial Estate in Perth. And again, Mr. Smith, over to you to introduce this report. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Convener. And this is the second application related to the proposals to provide a western extension to Inverarmond Industrial Estate. Again, I'll provide a summary of what the application proposes before showing a slide which identifies the location. So the application itself seeks to delete a planning condition requiring that contributions in line with Policy 5 within LDB2 and the associated supplementary guidance are made towards regional transport infrastructure costs. This would include elements such as the roads infrastructure to the immediate west and large projects such as the CTLRs. It should also be noted that the condition currently provides for a reduction in what would have been the required contributions by excluding the first 10,000 square metres developed from any requirement to make a payment. The reasoning presented by the applicant focused on a position that the condition does not meet the various tests set out in Circular 4/1998, which provides guidance on the use of conditions in planning permission. This issue has been reviewed with legal colleagues and the view of the applicant is not accepted. This issue is discussed at paragraphs 49 to 55 in the report. So overall, this application is in effect seeking to remove any obligation to make any contributions for the entirety of the resultant development. The consideration of officers is that the condition should remain, and as such the application be refused. We'll now move to a slide which, similar to the previously considered item, identifies the site location, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Again, first off the mark is Councillor Simpson, so over to you for your question, sir.
Thank you very much, Kira. This is very similar to the previous one in terms of the intent of the applicant. I just wanted to check that there has been no other changes with regard to this application or this permission, and I just wanted to check it's a fairly recently granted. So all these matters were probably fully aired at the time, and we're not in the position to say that these contributions were not fully aware of these contributions at the time of the application.
Thank you for your question, and I will go to Mr. Smith, but certainly considering we'd already negotiated a reduction in this, I think it was well negotiated at the time, but over to Mr. Smith for more detail. Thank you.
I won't talk too much about the negotiations and how they went, but certainly I would say that the application, if you look at the reference number, dates back to 2019. It took until fairly recently for a decision to be issued on that, and I think the report at the time said the vast majority of that time was related to this very issue being discussed, and it was not accepted that they should not require to pay the contributions, taking account of the concerns that they raised and the economic situation that we were in. At that point, we agreed to waive the first 10,000 square metres, but technically they should have required to have paid that. But in the interest of moving forward and giving some recognition to the comments that they were making in terms of the financial issues. We agreed to that initial waiving of around about a third of the development being required to make payment so that they could get started. But yes, to answer your question, this issue was discussed for around about a year during the processing of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I take it that answers your question, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for officers regarding this particular application? No further questions. Councillor Wilson, you would like to put forward a motion?
Thanks, convener, and I'm happy to move the paper for refusal of the withdrawal of this condition. Mr. Smith's made my speech for me, I think. There's already been a lot of discussion about this. The developers have known what the story is. They've seen this in front of them. We've made a concession, in my opinion, a pretty generous concession. I'm aware of the pressures on business, on every business, because of COVID, because of all the consequences of that, and because of the general economic situation. I don't live in a parallel universe any more than any other council in this room does, I don't think. We were fully aware of this, but it's time that some businesses really recognise that there are obligations on them in regard to what we've just discussed and what we're looking at towards contributions to the infrastructure. And as a small successful city, if we don't get that infrastructure, then we don't prosper. It's as simple as that. And businesses and other organisations should be prepared to play their part and step up to the plate. Therefore, I'm happy to move the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Simpson, I noticed you were coming in also to move, but are you happy to second, or do you have an alternative that you wish to put forward?
It was a dead heat there, according to my timing, convener, but I'm happy to defer to Councillor Wilson and happy to second. I think all the comments that we made for the previous application apply here, but it is an opportunity for us to send out a strong message to developers that you cannot expect to get permission to argue about it for some time and then immediately try and change the more onerous ones afterwards. I think that's not the way forward. We need to be encouraging active travel where possible, and I think it's a responsibility of developers to include that as part of their application, not to try and, I think someone used it, and winkle out of it once the permission has been granted. So I can't see anybody objecting to us refusing this application. So I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I do need to ask before we go to further comments, is there amendment? Is there any an amendment to this, to the motion put forward? Nope, nothing is coming forward, so I can open it up for comment. So Councillor Barnacle, your comment, please.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Very briefly, just to say I fully agree with Councillors Wilson and Simpson in relation to both the application here and the one before it. Really quite astounding to me that they've sought to remove these very genuine and necessary conditions. So I fully agree. Absolutely, we have to be firm on this. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Barnacle. Any further comments on this particular application? No, thank you very much indeed. I agree with all the comments made, and this application is refused. So that then brings us on to the final part of business today, which is a proposal of application notice. This is for residential development, access, landscaping, SUDs and associated works at the land southwest of Kintillo Cemetery, Bridge of Erne, and it's part of LDP2 H14. So as with all these things, many people will be aware this is my real push. So what I would need from councillors is any comments or any specific points that you would like officers to look at when the application comes forward. There's no real questioning at this point. It is literally just advising officers of what it is they would like, given specific information on. I noticed that Councillor Wilson has put in a question, but anyway, we'll come to that. So we'll start working way through the list. Councillor Waters, if we could start with your comments, please, as to what you would wish officers to look at specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Just two areas, two comments. One, the first one is affordable housing. You know, it is important in these semi-rural locations that we do get affordable housing in there, and I would ask officers to look and ensure the provision in line with our LDP and policies are met by the developer. And the second one is regarding the highest environmental standard of housing that we can possibly achieve. If, you know, again, referring to a paper that will be coming forward tomorrow, which you know is the council's drive or our responsibility to hit net zero, and within the papers it clearly states that there's a need to build our house to net zero standards to save the costs of retrofitting in the future. And while I accept that within there is a lot more to do within planning regulations and within our LDP to achieve that, I would ask officers to use what we have in our LDP to try and get the highest environmental standard of housing as absolutely possible, but also to chat to the developer and encourage them to put an application in that delivers the highest environmental standards within their the budgets. I feel this is very important going forward, that we do provide housing that is getting near net zero. While I accept the challenges with passive house or getting developers to build houses to passive house standard may be challenging, I feel we could, as a council and as a push or work with developers more to increase the standard of housing that we are getting built to save these future costs. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Simpson, your request of officers when the application comes forward, please.
Thank you. I note in page 1991 there is no specific reference to active travel infrastructure, and I think, given what we were saying earlier, I think all applications should give consideration to this. And as I say, I hope also that I can't imagine these developers hang on my every word, but I hope that they will take cognizance of the comments made during the previous two papers, and that they will not cover this application with what I describe as pails of greenwash, which can then be discarded once the application is granted, and come back and ask us to delete all the things that they don't particularly like. I think that's the wrong way to approach things. So I think we need to have active travel facilities to the fore, and also ensure that all the undertakings that they make at the time of application continue and are not, they don't make an attempt to alter that once the application has been granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Wilson, your comments and question.
Thanks. I start off with a question on page 87. Where it says a revised submission is required due to an additional applicant landowner being added. It doesn't give us any details about that. Could we be let into the secret on that one, please?
Certainly, I didn't know it was that much of a secret, but Mr. Scott, over to you if you could fill that in, please.
Yes, convener, thanks for the question, Councillor Wilson. So you'll note from paragraph 15 that a proposal of application notice was submitted and considered in June 2021. This is in effect the same site, albeit the developer has taken the opportunity to add an additional applicant to the proposal. So the regulations actually required that the applicant has to undertake consultation to ensure that they comply with regulations. This is why we've got the new proposal of application notice. It's also highlighted that this site is almost half a hectare larger than the previous site. So for those reasons, a new proposal of application notice is required.
Thank you very much, as ever, for your detailed answer. My comments, convener, if I might give them now, and associate myself with the earlier comments made by my colleagues on the committee. This is a designated housing site, so it's important to look at that. But I think it's very visible, so the scale, design and layout is particularly important, and its relationship to nearby land uses, including the cemetery and a place of worship, because I think we need to regard places such as cemeteries with the dignity and peace and tranquility that they deserve. I think, given that it's on the flat in the Earn Valley and there's a lot of clay soil around, water resources, soils, flooding and drainage are particularly important. And transport, we've spoken a lot about it this morning, but this is very near the route of the Contillo bus, if I can call the local bus that, and I'm pleased to see that transport assessments included, but I think there is an opportunity here to help enhance public transport perhaps in the Bridge of Earn area because of the additional houses. But my main point is about noise. And it's nothing to do with what the houses will create in terms of noise, but it's what the noise from the motorway will create to the houses. I've never lived in Bridge of Earn, convener, but I've often been there in terms of work and at other times, and the noise, particularly in certain climatic conditions from the motorway, is significant. I'll use that word, not an over emotional word, but it's quite major, it's quite significant, and therefore I think how we protect the houses from the motorway, this refers to Councillor Richard Waters' comment about the quality of the insulation of the houses, but the sound insulation, and therefore I think we need to pay particular attention to that. And as we don't want this to be added in. It's happened here at Bellway Housing on the bypass, and to make alterations to the planning conditions and that. So I don't want that to happen again here. We really should make sure that the quality of life for those residents who want to buy houses here is met from day one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor James and then Councillor Barnacle.
Convener, as you'd expect, Councillor Wilson's probably covered pretty much everything we can cover, and stole what I was going to ask, to be fair. I must admit, when I was looking at this, I had to do a double take on the map on page 93. I thought we were actually building on a cemetery, but I realise now it's for the plot across the road, and that's what I was going to say, was to be mindful of its position adjacent to the cemetery. I'd also noticed on the list of consultees, there's nothing from the health service other than environmental health, and infrastructure is always, we keep saying it, we put in these large housing developments with no infrastructure. We've just been dealing with infrastructure on the last two applications where they've wanted to come and change it. But it's okay building all the houses, but it's the services that go with it. So, I would like to see something from the health board. Are we going to be overloading the doctor's surgery? All doctor surgeries are under pressure, and would there be any, mileage in highlighting it beforehand? So those are the only 2 points. Thanks, convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor James. I must admit, I concur. I would like to see submissions from the Health Board, but anyway, that's a different thing. And lastly, Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, convener. Just very briefly, it's a comment really picking up on what Councillor Waters said. I'm very keen to see that policy 20 on affordable housing is looked at in terms of the application. and also the design of the houses, because paragraph 13 mentions policy 52, new development and flooding. We know that Bridge of Erne is on a floodplain, so again I would make a plea that when we're looking at design we take that into account. That was all really. I think many speakers have expressed you know, what policies should be considered, and I totally concur. Cheers.
Thank you, and thank you, councillors, for your involvement in that. As I've stated year on, every single time there is a proposal of application notice coming forward, I see this is the most important part. This is the point where we get to say what it is we're interested in and what it is we want more information on. So thank you very much for your participation. What I will now say, can we note that report and move on with the day?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you very much indeed. And lastly, that just leaves me to wish everybody on the Planning and Development Management Committee a very Merry Christmas. It's the last time that I'll see you this year. So I want to wish you and your family all the best for the festive season. And we'll be back bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for the first committee of the year in 2022. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.